And of course she thought of me, an older unknown critic. And she called me and she said, do you want to do a show? I said, yes, I'll do a Pierre Talcott show. So I went to visit him in Normandy. He was already about 80 years old. He worked in a huge, freezing cold barn, and he'd arrived at a point where he'd refined his idea so much that the paintings were this big. And they were all lined in this freezing cold barn, and he had, gloves with the fingers cut off. And I had to practically crawl on my knees to go and look and see these paintings. And then he did have some drawings in a drawing cabinet, and he pulled out the drawers and I looked at the drawing. And I spent the day with Talcott, picked the exhibition, went to New York, made the exhibition, which I thought was a beautiful, beautiful exhibition with a lot of those black and white drawings, and he was a fantastic guy, I thought. You know his work. Wonderful. Nobody came. The director herself of the museum wasn't the least bit interested because she got the money and I didn't use half of it. She didn't even come. Nobody came to the opening. Even the French embassy, I called and said, don't you want to make a little reception for Pierre Talcott? No, and they never turned up, and the whole thing was a total loss. But what was interesting for me, and I just add this one anecdotally, he was responsible for one of the great poems in the English language by Wallace Stevens. Wallace Stevens bought a Talcott before he was a very good painter. He bought a sort of conventional still life. But it inspired him so much that he wrote one of his best poems that everybody in school studies in my country. And when I came and Talcott said, vous êtes américaine, you're American. I said, yes. Oh, did you ever hear of Wallace Stevens? He had heard that this poem was important, this poet was important, and he was very happy to know that an American writer like me knew the poem and knew that his painting was the source of that poem. So it's a very nice story. But to this day, he's unknown in New York. Nobody gives a damn. No matter how many people I say, you should really do a Talcott show, they say, who? So that's the fate of some delicate, sensitive artists. On the other hand, in Europe, he's picking up now, thanks to the enthusiasm of a young art dealer that I know. He's not so young anymore, who just insisted and insisted and insisted, and now there are quite a number of publications. And in Zurich, they had a big retrospective, which alas I didn't get to, but that's what happens. It's very uneven who gets acknowledged and who doesn't. I'm so happy that you know the work.
Yeah, I was stumbling and mumbling around Paris, and I walked in. I remember the little gallery. I walked up the steps, and I went, oh, who's this?
How good! It makes me very happy, and probably David too, right, David?
Absolutely.
Here's a lady who actually appreciates it.
Charcoal drawings.
Oh, those are so wonderful.
Really.
Oh, maybe we'll get a show here. How about that?
Sounds like work, Dore.
I'll help. We'll go together, right?
And I also thought of the Australian artist Tony Tuxon with
Tony Tuxon, yeah.
with his, that reminded me of
I think David admired Tuxon too.
thinking of Australian artists.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's great to meet someone else.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Good, thank you.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yes.
Can I address the question to you, David? Has New York had an influence on your work, living over there? Is that compared to living in the outback?
I guess the thing about being in New York is that you are compelled, almost insistently compelled all the time, to take yourself very seriously and to be very ambitious and to work very hard, because there are so many people who are struggling for some kind of exposure, some kind of career, some kind of meaning in their work, that you feel honoured now to be as brave and as strong and as courageous as you can be. So I guess that's probably the single most influential fact for me. The other issue is that in some senses, I see some of these more recent paintings like Elemental Union, maybe even something of the grid, something of the net, in those. It's got something more to do with architecture and as well.
On C42nd Street, that's
yes, exactly.
You mean Mondrian?
That's right.
Yes.
The Australian painter Robert Jacks, who was student in New York in the 70s and came back here with grids. When I saw the exhibition, I thought of Robert Jacks and his experience in New York.
In New York, yeah. Well, actually, I'm a New Yorker, so I think it's a great place. But it's true that almost anybody who comes through and goes home has been touched by it. It's inevitable. You know. Yeah.
I think the work is more like Ansel.
I can't hear.
I think the work is more like Ansel Kiefer's work.
Kiefer?
It's like, to me, it's like Kiefer. It's coming from that place. And if you talk about it, working towards the light and the flickering of the light, and if you keep it in that context, I don't see how, because New York's full of grids and bright lights, and I think it would cross-reference.
Oh, we have our dark alleys too.
I know, but I think it seems to be trying to make cross-reference between the grid and the city of New York, when to me, if the whole conversation has been about an internal journey, a meditative journey that David's been on, then I would like it, and this is my personal opinion, to Ansel Kiefer about your.
Well, it's true that you can associate each individual in this room, should make individual. To me, it's very remote from Kiefer. Very.
Do you think so?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
In what way?
In what way? Kiefer, to me, is a Wagnerian painter who seeks tremendous climaxes. David is a much more introspective and I would say contained painter, inward painter. Kiefer is a very outward painter. You may think because the motifs there are certain similarities, certainly, and Kiefer purports to deal with that very difficult problem, his problem being a German, and sometimes he deals with the problem, he thinks he's dealing with the problem of my problem being a Jew, but I feel it's, to me, it has a sort of thunderous Wagnerian overtone that you never find in Rankin's work. I haven't, at any rate, but it's different. David can answer. Yeah.
The issue about these recent paintings is why I mentioned the fact that I live and work in New York, and there is one is surrounded by architecture and one is surrounded by geometry. But then these ones are also very much a meditation and a reflection on my whole interest in Buddhism. This is like the lattice, the fabric in Buddhist thought, where everything is a reflection and everything is individual planes off into the universe. So that these are all based on that same kind of concept. They're not mutually exclusive. That's the point about a painting and a great poem, is that it can reference apparently disparate and often conflicting things and take on meaning and resonance because of it.
You're as bad as my students. Reference is not a verb.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
It was just the light. It was just the fact that you touched on and been discussing the light and that whole conversation. And although Kiefer is German and he has his hands in Torberg, and maybe he's trying to cross-reference in his philosophy, but I just felt just had that that was the link, because Peter certainly, in the darkest of his works, has the light coming through. He burns a light in someone.
Dore, do you have a favourite work in this exhibition, in this show? One that stands out, one that touches you more than the rest?
There's several. I wouldn't say favorite, no. I'm very, very fond of the Dona Nomas Pacem that you're standing next to. And the three, I can't remember what David calls it, the painting, what's it called? Three Crossings, I think is one of his best works ever. I love this painting that's behind me. So, you know, and one of the Golgotha triptych I like very much. It's hard for me to have a favorite. In the watercolor section, which is very delicate, I like the first one that you put there first. I love that one. And I like the one that looks like an echo of a stone that Frederick Eve wrote about in the catalog. What's that? Didn't you, Frederick Eve? Yeah, yeah. Yes?
Yeah, I was just wondering, I've heard so many critics and artists say that painting is dead, and I think that, you know, everyone would agree, seeing these works, that just, they blow that theory out of the water, but I was just wondering, David's doing something so different to any other Australian.
That's a very important, serious question.
I'm just wondering what impact his work will have now and in the future, and, you know, Australian painting and painting in general.
I answer that by saying I believe that very few people are sensitive to painting. Always, no matter how many people throng the Tate Gallery or the MoMA or whatever, very few of them see those paintings or feel those paintings. And I don't think the ratio ever changes. So all of this chatter about painting is dead, blah, 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 it doesn't interest me at all. First of all, I believe that painting, which comes out of drawing, is biologically necessary. If you go to a beach and you see children, they pick up a stick and what do? They draw. I believe we are biologically destined to draw and write and paint. It doesn't worry me at all that everybody in the world is interested in what I call shit painters, like Andy Warhol, that I despise. That doesn't worry me because there's always going to be a real artist amongst us. That goes for all the arts, poetry as well. If you look there in the United States, there are many small poetry magazines filled with really rank, terrible so-called poems, but amongst all those hundreds of people being published, there is a poet, and there'll be another and another. I have no doubt that painting will never be dead. But the sad thing is, I happen to teach in a school where, which is art, architecture, and engineering school. The middle generation so-called painters are teachers there, and they tell their students, what are you doing that for? Painting is dead. Which is terrible, 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 terrible. And talking about Stevens, he cut out of a lecture he was going to give, I don't know, he discarded one of the most wonderful descriptions I've ever heard about a painter. He's talking about Picasso, and he says, there are all these guys sitting there in the room, and one by one, they get up and walk out, and finally, the painter sits down and paints. It's wonderful. All those guys being alter egos of the painter.
Yes. Yes.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think we've probably taken enough of time to go through all of these ideas, and I'd like everyone, please, to thank Dore for the time. Thank you so much for coming, everybody, and enjoy the show. And once again, thank you so much, Dore Ashton.
Thank you. Thank you.